This is an interview with Frank Judge Platt, August 27th, 1992, at 2502 Minton Road, Melbourne, Florida. Interviewer Nancy Asseco, cameraman Robert Gilbert. Equipment, camera Sony BVP50, Beta SP recorder Sony BVW35. Audio on channels 2 and 4. Copyright Brevard County Historical Commission, 1992. Judge Platt, Tape 1.
Bro, could you know that mic one?
Okay. Tell us when you were born and where.
I was born in March the 26th, 1915, about 20 miles west of here, and 10 miles, that's Deer Park, and 10 miles north of Deer Park at Wolf Creek. And so I lived there until I was, I think 19 and 20, we moved to Fellsmere, and then we moved back over there, and we moved back to Fellsmere, and I went to school down there in the first grade, and I come to Melbourne in 1924 in the second grade, and graduated from Melbourne High School, and went to school first in Deer Park to a young teacher, and the log train run right by there, and I got up in the winter and watched the log train go by, so she didn't say anything about it, so I didn't learn too much. And then I come to Melbourne, we had a dipping vat right in the middle of where the mall is up there now, Melbourne Mall, and a cow pen there, and had a camp house, and we stayed there in that camp house with our older sister. I think there's 4 of us going to school, me and my brother and 2 sisters, and we had to walk out and catch the bus on 192, and I stayed home most of the time. I didn't like to go to school, so I didn't learn anything there, and then to Fellsmere, and I learned something down there. The schools are quite a bit different then than they are now. I think one thing is not very many kids in hardly any classes. There were just a few. I think Deer Park, they had all the kids from first grade through the 12th in one room, one big room for a schoolhouse. But there wasn't but like 28 kids in the whole school, and they learned something though. Most of them kids learned quite a bit. They taught the main thing was reading and writing, arithmetic. They didn't care much about anything else. Social studies or anything didn't bother them. I enjoyed going to school though, and I had a lot of friends and never had no trouble in school.
When your family first came here, what kind of work were they doing?
Raising cattle, that's all they've ever known, is to come down from, well, I think my great-granddaddy brought cattle from North Carolina. Him and an old fellow named Barber drove cattle down, and they come through this country here somewhere. I don't know where they crossed St. John's River, but they went over here just east of Holy Paw, and old man Barber stopped there, but Platt went on over to Kathleen, which is right north of Lakeland, and it was a town then, and then there was a town south of it was Mulberry. It was there at that time, he said, and they stopped there, and then my granddaddy was born there at Kathleen, and he was born in 1843, and then they had come down there about 1920 or 21. They bought land from Kathleen west towards Tampa, around where Plant City is, and on the old abstracts, why most of that land's got Platt's name on it way back. And then they moved to a little bit west of Kathleen, east of Kathleen, and one of my granddad's oldest uncles was born there. And then my dad was born in just west of Kissimmee on Reedy Creek, down south of Kissimmee, southwest of Kissimmee. And then he was born in 1872, and they moved to Deer Park and built a big first house in Deer Park. My granddad built it, and he stayed there until 1895. He got married and moved over here. He bought a land over here, but he'd been over here ever since he was a kid. They always come over here. He even had some cattle over here. And then he built a house over there, and he sold it to my grandmother, and he built a house out here at what's called Livingston Hamilton. There wasn't any trees. It was all open country then, just grass. Very seldom you'd see a pine tree somewhere, and that was about it. Maybe an oak tree, now and then, very few. And there was a big hammock out there, and he built a house out there by it, and that's where my oldest sister was born there. And then the rest of them, he had houses over there. The next one, I think, was born over there just south of Fort Christmas. That's south of 520. You go across from Cocoa, in a place called Savage Place. And he bought it from Henry Parton, or either Henry bought it. I believe he bought it from Henry Parton. He gave him 30 head of hogs for the house and 40 acres of land. Now, that was pretty high price. Hogs was worth probably $2 to $5 a head. Land wasn't worth probably 3 cents an acre, and house wasn't. It didn't cost much to get the lumber to build a house, so it didn't cost much. And labor didn't hardly cost anything. They had, most of the houses were built by just a bunch of people get together and build a house, and 2 or 3 fellas done most all the work, but they'd have a lot of help, you know, in getting around. And they hauled all their material in ox wagons. Mostly, very few people had mules or horses that they used. They used them for cow work, but not the mule. Now, there was one man had a mule. It was real good. One of the best animals to work a cow you ever saw was this mule. And some fella that had 101 ranch, I think it was Zach Miller, come down here, and he went back and somebody interviewed him, and he wrote a book, or he had part of it in the book. And he said he was in Florida and introduced horses, that everybody was riding mules, but there's only one man. But the mule could run as fast backwards as it could forward. So in Parton cattle, you didn't have to turn around. A mule can't turn around fast as a horse. So that mule would back up and head a cow, or go forward, and he could go forward pretty fast. Some old mules can move pretty quick. So he was impressed with that mule, and he later on wrote a book and told about that mule.
What about the house that y'all built? You built a house here in Melbourne, or did
No, it was built in 1914, and he bought it in 1923, I think. And it's still standing, 7 bedrooms, 2-story, nice house in a pretty place. Big oak trees around, but when we moved there was no oak trees around. Now then, I guess they're probably 60 foot high and wider than that. Some of the trees, some of the limbs, I imagine, is 50 foot long on it. So you don't have to hurry up to make a forest. It grows pretty quick, because I can remember when there wasn't any here in it. But there wasn't hardly any trees here. You could see for miles in most any direction. Right over east of us there was a sand ridge over there, high sand ridge, white sand, and you could see a gopher over there crawling on that sand ridge. And now then, you can't see 50 yards in any direction. It's grown up in palmettos and everything else. Very few palmettos. There were little round patches of palmettos back in them days. We used to like to rabbit hunt when I was a kid. Get some little old dog of some kind, they'd run them, and they'd run them from one rabbit patch to the other, and you couldn't shoot one standing still. And we had 22 single-shot rifles. You had to let him run from one rabbit patch to kill him. We had a lot of fun. We got there, and we usually spent the night and eat the most of what we killed. So we didn't have too good a luck, I guess you'd say.
What other impressions did you have of this area when you were a boy?
Oh, the one thing was that open country. You could see cows for miles, and we worked cattle all the time, seeing rode horses. And it was an enjoyable life. You got to like it to be in the cow business, and everybody can't be in, well, even farming. Everybody can't do it. I've known some people that had owned the ranch, and their granddad owned it, and then their dad owned it, and then they didn't have anything to do with it. They went off to school, and school wasn't too good around here, so I went back. One boy I remember real well went up to Wisconsin, went to school and graduated up there, and then he come back, and for 30 or 40 years he run that ranch and cow hunted nearly every day, and he was more in the way than he was help whenever he helped you. And one thing about it I remember real well, I went and helped him a lot, especially when they got in bad times, so I'd go help him. He would always rode an old crazy horse, and he'd get in the middle of a bunch of cows, 1,000, 1,500 head, and he'd find one he wanted to run out, and he'd run that cow just as fast as he could and run all the cows over you, and then you had to wait about a half hour to go gather them all back up. But he knew cattle. He knew what one was worth down to the penny, what that cow would bring on the sale, or if you butchered it and carried it to market. He knew all that part about cattle, and he was a good cowman. Everybody praised him highly as a ranch foreman, you might say, even though he owned it while he run the thing himself. And he was real good at it. But it takes longer to be a cowboy, I think, than anything you want to do. One thing is there's no books. like one story they tell about over here at the Mormons, they brought some fella from Salt Lake City over there, and they were telling they had about 1,500, 2,000 head of cattle to pen, and he went, got up to the gate. The old cattle were pretty wild. He got them in off the marsh, and they were pretty wild, and he brought them up there, and when they got them right up to the gate, they were just about time to start in while he run up in front of them and hollered, "Wait a minute, let me see what it says on page 22. So all the cows went back. It taken them a couple of days to gather them again. And I thought that's pretty good. But it's about that way. There's so many things you got to learn. You got to learn how to ride a horse real good and how to break a horse. You got to learn all these things, work a dog, work a whip. And then you got to be a good animal husbandman and a good veterinarian. You got to be a good farmer. And you got to know cows, like some people can put 250 head of Brahma white heifer calves in a pen with their mother, and they'll stay with them about 15 or 20 minutes outside of the pen as they're bringing them up, and maybe take an hour to pen them. They get them in the pen, they cut all the calves on one side and all the cows on the other, and they run them calves down a chute, and that guy will stand there and tell them which cow that calf belongs to. Maybe there's 7 or 8 different marks and brands, and he also knows the number of that cow and everything about that calf. Just about he knows it. But now you don't learn this. You got to be born with it somehow. I don't know. Now those are about 6 or 8 of these people is all I've ever known that could do that. Everybody learns to mammy one when you got a cow with a potted calf and a white face or a black nose, or maybe he's a little crippled, or he's got a spot on him somewhere, where you can remember that belongs to such and such an old cow. But when they're all the same color, all the same size, look just alike, I don't see how they mammy them.
Tell us about the whip. Tell us about the whips and how they were used.
The whip was a real necessity into cattle business. A lot of these old marshes and sea myrtles and old black myrtles, we call them, were real thick, and a lot of sawgrasses in place, and the cows would have trails go down and they wouldn't come out. And they used whips used to was about 20 or 22 foot long, and somebody'd ride down there and pop that whip, and it scared all them cows, and they'd come out in the opening where they could get them, where they couldn't hardly go in there and get them. And then they had dogs to hold the cattle up, and you handled the dog with a whip too. He knew to stop when you hollered and popped that whip, while he knew to come back to you. And the dogs were real good. They were mostly better than the cowboys. They worked. They liked that cow business. Them dogs did, and they were raised out of special stocks of dogs. That I remember we started ones. We still have some of that breed that we got back in 1920 or 21. I'm sure that that's the same dogs, and I think most any cow dogs has got some of that blood in it, because everybody got a puppy and all scattered them around, so they still, all of them look alike anyhow. They're yellow, some bobtailed and some long-tailed, and yellow ones usually have a black mouth, and the black ones has a yellow mouth, and some are bobtailed, and even you breed 2 bobtails and you get maybe all long-tailed puppies, or you breed 2 long-tailed and you get all bobtail puppies, so that's all some of the same stock, I'm sure. And then the whip, another use of it was it signals from houses. People didn't live close together, and somebody popped the whip 3 times and leave about a minute between times while they knew he was in trouble. So they go help him. Maybe his horse was bogged down or house on fire or anything. Well, that's a signal they used. And then it helps to drive the cattle too. You can be cattle start to drift off in the direction when you're driving a lot of cattle, 1,000 head or more, and they would drift off towards you the way you didn't want them to go. Where you could start up the side and pop the whip towards, like whip towards it that way, and they would swing back the other way. So it helped out. And a whole lot fewer people could drive a bunch of cows if you used a whip. It's pretty hard to learn. Some people learn to use them, but then it comes natural. So like with me, before I could talk, I reckon I was trying to pop a whip. And today the whips has got down to where about 10 foot long is all they are, maybe 12. But a long time ago they used 20 foot. Something else too, they could kill a big rattlesnake with that whip, or cut the end of a bull's nose bite off, split it with that thing. They were real good. They could hit anything they whipped at. I've seen a lot of them mow the grass down with it, to go along, whip the grass and cut it right off. It's really a handy thing. You can make an old cow go. If a bull's fighting or something, you can ride up there and whip him in the face and hear you destroy. A lot of times, a cow or a bull run at you, and you got the whip already in your hand anyway, or you can hit him in the face with it and then turn him back. And probably a lot of horses would say that. I don't think anybody, because a man can outdo a cow. He can get out of the way. Most people don't think so, and they're scared of him. There's nothing any funnier than a man about to get hooked in a cow pen. Everybody else sitting there, but it ain't funny to him. Everybody will just die laughing if a cow about to catch somebody. Sometimes they do catch them. I seen one of my brothers. We were going to cut a bull's horns off, and the rope broke just as he went to put it. We put a tie him to a post at the bottom of the post, at the side of a cow pen, and then you throw a rope under and put it back through the rope and pull it down on his hind legs and pull his feet out from under. He falls over on his side and you can hold him. Well, just as he threw the rope under there, the bull whipped back at him and broke the rope, and he run about 30 yards, and there was an oak tree there with a low limb, and he hung his hands up on the oak tree, and the bull hooked in his belt and went all the way down to his shoe, tore his britches all the way down, and never put a mark on him. Then another one had one run at him. It was a big old steer, and caught his belt right beside there, caught the belt, and of course the belt broke, so it didn't hurt anything. But the people have I don't know, I guess they're kind of like football players. They're kind of immune to getting hurt or something. You know, you see guys pile up out there and ordinarily kill somebody, and they do it hundreds of times every weekend, and nobody gets killed. Some of them get something broke. Well, the cow people get something broke too, but not hardly anybody ever gets killed. It's I don't know where it's, they stay in shape. They work and go and do something all the time, 10-hour days, you know, and in good shape. But I seen bull get at somebody and almost had him hooked all the time, and he'd get on the fence before the bull could hook him. So something a man can outdo that. I had an uncle said that a man could outdo a hog or a cow or a dog. That the dog can't bite you if you don't get scared and do something wrong, and a hog can't cut you if you don't get scared and do something wrong. And it's about the same way in a lot of accidents people have in cars. They driving a car down the road, and all of a sudden something comes up in front of them. They just throw up their hands or holler, "Oh my God," and they're hit. If they had went somewhere, old man Hudgens out there said anybody that parted cows would never wreck a car unless something mechanically went wrong, because he'd see a place to go. Because when you're parting cows, there'd be a cow over there, or a horse over there, and a horse over here, and a cow over there, where the cow's gonna go. So that guy over there's gonna hit her, and this guy's gonna hit her, and they all run together. If they all hit, they'd kill somebody for sure, maybe all three of them. Well, just at the last millionth of a second, something happens. Nobody knows what happens, but the cow go one way and the two horses go the other. They get right to that edge, and then they give up or something. I don't know what happens.
Tell us a little bit about hunting. You probably did quite a bit of hunting around here.
Yeah, we've hunted at the same place over here about, what is it? I guess 25 miles west of here. And so I think I started hunting over there sometime in I know it was in the late 30s. I don't remember the year. Probably 38 or somewhere along there. And we've hunted over there every year since that, except in 3 years I was in the Army. I didn't go, but my brothers and them hunted over there.
What would you hunt?
Deer. We hunt deer all the time. That's about all we ever hunt. And we run dogs. And we're like a slow dog. And we ride horses. And we keep up with the dogs and surround the areas they're going into, get there ahead of the dog. And then if the dog jumps a deer, we have to catch them all. Catch them. If we got one dog, got three, we catch them. And then if it's a buck and somebody shot at him, while we discuss where they maybe hit him or not, or where they think he's gone or not, and then we put the dogs back on him and run him and see what happened to him. And we catch the dog and then go hunt another trail. And we usually find a buck track, and put the dog on it. The buck track is, sometimes you probably couldn't tell the difference, but usually the buck walks more on his toes, and he has a wider back foot. On the back foot is wider at the back end. It doesn't come as sharp as a doe's, real sharp, and the buck turns out at the back, so you can tell it's a buck. And then the weight of the deer, how the dirt is, and how much sign he made after looking at it for 30 or 40 years where you finally get to notice a little bit difference in the tracks. And especially if you go on and get to kill a big old buck, well, then you remember what that track looked like. We have a lot of fun at it. We run down the creeks. Now we got walkie-talkies where we talk to one another all the time. But a long time ago, we run a lot of big old swamps and hammocks and creeks and branches and places where the dog was coming down the creek where you can't tell what's on the other side, but always knew who was over there because the same people that run cows together all the time, whereas the ones that hunts together. And I knew what the man across the creek was doing, whatever he was doing, because the way the dog was barking, how the dog was working, he'd be way up if the dog was going fast, and if the dog was real slow, he'd be further back behind. Sometimes we only hunt with just 2 people and 6, and sometimes many as 12, but that's very rare. And they don't try to kill a deer; they just go along to hear the dogs bark, which is really, if the dogs bark, we have a better day than we do when we kill a deer if the dogs don't work too good. The dogs working is a whole chase, and if you ever run deer on horses and dogs, you will never take a stand anywhere or climb up in a tree to wait on a deer to come. I wouldn't wait 10 minutes to kill the biggest deer in the United States up a tree, I tell you, because he won't come for a month if I get up there. So I wouldn't hunt like that, and I don't think very many people that ever hunted on horseback would ever hunt very much. They may go maybe once or twice a year or something like that, where they know there's a deer and they can kill him. Of course, they never do.
Did you ever run into any alligators?
Yeah, there used to be a lot of alligators. We used to go across here when they first made 192 out through there, and a lot of times we'd cross there, and there wasn't room for all of them to get up on the bank, laying alligator to alligator for 3 or 4 miles on both sides of the road. They'd be up there sunning, and some of them big ones, some 18 foot, I guess, big alligators. We had one over there one time. This is sometime back in the early 20s, I guess, about 1920, and we were coming in an old Model T Ford, and the alligator was across the road, and his tail was in the ditch on one side, and his head was just about the ditch on the other side. So they figured about 22 feet. And he wouldn't move, so we couldn't get by. We couldn't run in the ditch. There wasn't even room to go through the ditch anyway. There's a fence there, and on the other side either. And they throwed sticks at him, wouldn't let me even get out of the truck. Afraid, I guess, he'd catch me. Probably been a good thing if he had. Anyhow, they throwed sticks at him and everything. All he'd do is just throw his head up, open his mouth, and blow real big. He wouldn't move. So we backed away off down the road. My dad was driving, and he said that we'd back off, let him alone. He'll move pretty quick. So we backed off down the road a quarter of a mile or so, and pretty quick the old gator crawled on off. And I never seen him anymore. I think somebody shot his eye out. He stayed down there on the old trestle where the railroad runs in there. The old railroad trestle stayed down there for a long time. And a lot of people saw him and would go down there just to see him because he was a real big one. But now some of the caves over here on Merritt Island, somewhere over there in that country, is big enough that you could lead a horse down in and get water. So there was some big alligators there at one time or something. I don't know. It may have been some kind of a dinosaur, but I don't know if any of the prehistoric animals that lived in caves like alligators.
What do you mean caves?
Big a hole in the face so where they can get in a cave, you know. And,
Gators do that. They have dens.
Yeah, they dig a hole, and he'll dig a hole pretty deep down, and then he'll go dig out a great big place in there, wash it out and bring all that dirt out, wash it all out. And then he comes out and fills up his stomach with air and goes in there and puts air in it. So he's got air in there all the time. And I killed one out here. He was 16 foot after we'd had the hide salted for a couple of months. And we stretched it out, and it's still a little over 16 feet. It had probably drawn up, I don't know how much a big alligator that much, but the man that bought it said it would draw up a lot. He was a lot bigger alligator than that. And he had caught a man saw him catch, he said, one of the biggest steers out there, which would have had to have been at least 1,400 pounds. And he said it was dry weather, and he reached away out to drink water, and the alligator taking nearly all his whole head in his mouth. And he said, of course, the steer jumped, and they went into the water, and he said alligator went to rolling over and over and over, and it turned in his steer over and over and over. He was that big. And then he never come up. He looked for the steer to float up, see. The alligator couldn't possibly eat him all. And then after he never did come up, he was otter hunting, and he lived right there he had a camp, and was camped right there on the bank where the alligator was. And then I killed this alligator there about 10 years after that. And I believe he was big enough maybe to do that, but he said that he had a cave big enough to take that steer in, and he probably didn't come out of it for a year. He stayed in there. There was a big one over there in Gene Green on about 8 miles west of where this one was, that my brother-in-law, they were catching the calves, the big ones, so he found where he'd went down the cave, and he put a bunch of posts and a whole lot of old logs and stuff up there in front of the cave where he couldn't get out. So he went back about a year, and all the posts and everything is there. So he said, well, I'll pull these up and get another one, because another big one, it's a big cave. Another big one will go down there, and I'll get him. And in 3 or 4 days, he went back to see if one had went in there, and that one had come out. He'd lived in there that whole year without anything to eat, so he stayed in there. But we used to get water at the Gator Caves when it's real dry weather. They always have water up close, because things come that they can eat. Hogs and rabbits and things that they can eat come to get water while they catch them. And he has this thing I was talking about, a cave, and then he puts air in there and keeps that water right up to the ground level. So you can go there, and the water's good to drink.
The cave's right there along the water, I guess, right along the riverbank or the...
No, they may be way out here 10 miles from the river in an old pond or something, but they keep the water up there to the thing. And it's always sandy. There's no mud around it. It's nearly always got sand. They go somewhere to get the sand, and have it where when he crawls out over a sand bar nearly every time. I guess it's on account of like hogs and things coming to drink. They don't want to go in the mud too much. Maybe rabbits wouldn't want to get in that mud, but he'd come up on that sand to drink. So then when it gets dry, he's got the sand there already for him.
Did you ever run into any big snakes?
Yeah, I've seen some awful big rattlesnakes. 2 that I remember real well was over 8 foot long. They were out here in the marsh. We were hog hunting, and they had a boat, and we was loading the hogs in the boat, and they were down between the bank, and they was on the berm between the canal and the bank. And it's the heavy switchgrass there, and we caught, I think, about 15 hogs out of the switchgrass. It wasn't very big. Loaded them in the boat, and somebody left his jacket and went back to get it, and he said, my gosh, there's a big rattlesnake right in the middle of where we had all been. So they killed him, and we didn't have any way to measure him, but this fellow was about 6'3", and his arms went way down below his knees, and he held him up as high as he could, and it was still, the tail was, he had him by the head, and the tail was still on the ground, so I figured he was 8 foot anyway. And then we went right on back, went around and stopped at the same place that the guy seen the alligator catch it, stopped and went there. There was a big hammock out there, and we were going to stop there to see some hogs there. And they walked up on the bank, and there lay another one just as big as that one. That was the 2 biggest one I think I ever seen, except in one that was over there this side of Holy Paw is a big long pond they call Rattlesnake Branch. I believe it was Rattlesnake Pond, one or the other. And there was about a 6 foot one and a big one there. And my brother-in-law killed them, and I didn't see the snake then, but I was back in a few days, and the bones was all there. And the 6 foot one was, it'd be this wide, and this other one was twice as wide and looked like twice as long. Now that's the biggest one I've ever seen, and I don't know where he come from. I don't know where he's a different kind of snake or what happened, but I think we have more than the kinds that they think about, because some of them will bite a dog, and it's a certain looking kind of snake, and he will die in a few minutes. And then one of the others that don't look like that one, they're not as round, they're flatter on the back, and their color's different. The one with the flatter back is not as round, will stop at anything that gets close to him, while he'll coil up and jar his rattles and hold his head back ready to strike. The other one will try to get away. He'll run. It may be a female and a male, but I don't think so. I think it's a different breed. And one of them's a lot more poison than the other one.
What would you do if there wasn't a doctor around and somebody get bit?
Well, there wasn't any doctors back in my time. What you had to do was to split the little hole so everything would come out. You want all the blood to come out. They say don't cut it, but if you don't get it out, it's going in. So the best thing to do is split the place, each one of the little holes there. Unless it's this way, you can split them both in one if you want to, just so the blood comes out, and try to make it bleed all you can. Then you put, always carried soda, baking soda, because somebody always needed baking soda for something. And anyway, You take put it in a little rag or something, put it on it, and then put a bunch of salt. We always had salt too, and put a bunch of salt on it and pour. If you got kerosene is the best. If you don't have it, turpentine if you got it. If you don't have that, well, just put water on it, and you can take it off in 30 minutes, and that all the soda will be black, and there'll be black some on some of the salt, and then it goes to a greenish color. Nearly all the salt will be that color. So change this about every hour. And we saved a lot of dogs. Never saved anybody. Never had anybody bit that I was there at the time or know of anybody. I know of people being saved with it, but I saved a lot of dogs that I know would have died pretty quick if I hadn't done something.
Okay, we're right near the end.
Can you show us how big around those snakes were?
Well, that one over there, I just seen the ribs, but they were wider than my hand, like this. Just
Interview with Judge Platt, 2502 Minton Road, Melbourne, Florida, August 27, 1992. Interviewer Nancy Asseco, cameraman Bob Gilbert. Equipment camera Sony BVP-50, Beta SP recorder, Sony BVW-35, audio on channels 2 and 4, copyright Brevard County Historical Commission 1992, Judge Platt, Tape 2.
Tell us what the first transportation was like you remember around here.
well, most of our first transportation was horse and wagons or ox wagons, and my dad had an old Model T. It run sometimes it didn't, but it didn't make no difference. We'd go somewhere, and if it stopped, we walked on where we were going and never thought nothing about it. And we had plenty of time. We would go to visit somebody where you usually spent the night, and you always eat with them. They were insulted if you didn't eat with them when you come and stately eat, whatever it was. Back in, I must have lived in the best time that man could live on Earth, because from an ox wagon to see a man on the moon, and you can get in an airplane, and I think it's a little over or a little less than 3 hours. You can be in London and go across the Atlantic in that short a time. Transportation is sure changed. Was from when I was little. We crossed, come across the river out there, and sometimes the bridge would be floated up, and we'd have to run up on a little piece and then go see if it was down on the right post and everything, and go a little further, and it'd take like 30 minutes, maybe an hour to cross the river. And one time we brought a bunch of hogs across there, and I don't know what happened. The bridge kind of slipped over a little bit, and they shifted, and we had them in a box on the truck. The cub we had the hogs in was just on the back of a flatbed truck, and it fell off in things. And one of my brothers got the thing opened, and all the hogs got out and went to shore, and we caught them later. Then none of them drowned. And they went on across with the truck, and then but we didn't cross with nothing else. I don't know if anybody else had any trouble crossing or not. They wouldn't let you cross later on. The water was so deep, and we always just put a spread on the front of a old Model T or Model A, some kind of a canvas, and go pretty fast, and the water take the fan belt off, and the water never would get up into the motor, and we just pushed a wave of water ahead of us and go right on across. And across the old creeks and places like that all the time, and canals, go in and cross it. So that's a long haul across the river out there.
You mean you went across the river in a car?
Yeah, well, see, they had a bridge there. This after 192 was built.
Okay.
They, even back before they really fixed it, they had an old bridge there and a grade that you could go on. Most of the time it was underwater, you couldn't go. But it was navigable. You could go through it part of the time.
You could drive across. You could
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
drive across the river.
Yeah.
Indian River or Banana or
The Indian
St.
River.
John's?
No, St. John.
The St. John's River.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
It was
more
a long
sense.
time before they ever built a bridge across the Indian River. there, and it was a little old narrow bridge. I remember one time it burnt out down there, a piece of it, and they didn't say anything about it, and some woman come along over the car, run into it and drowned him. The bridge was burning. Then when they fixed it, they only put two, I guess they were 4x8s or something across, and you drove across on them two pieces for a long time. I don't think anybody ever run off of that. They either had a sign up there that slowed down, waited to get across.
People used to drive through town in Melbourne?
Yeah, it was old sand, bad sand. In nearly all of Melbourne, you could get stuck. And we used to sit down there on that little old park there where Melbourne Avenue and let me see, what's the name of that other street? Anyhow, they come together right at the railroad, and the cars had to go around and come this way, and then the cars went on, and they had it. The sand was real bad, and they were always getting stuck out there. We used to go down there and watch the cars get in there and get stuck. And I wasn't big enough, but the people there would go help them push out every time. I never seen one have to leave. They just went. They never even got out of the car most of the time. Somebody just went out there and pushed them out. And them old Model Ts though was real good about going through sand, and the Model A's too. And that's what most people had.
That was a form of entertainment, watching people?
Right, yeah, watching. They were people sitting there, a lot of them playing checkers and talking, you know. There's a lot of benches out there in that little old park. They had a big pool like they're built up with coconut rock around it, and had water pouring it, and had fish in there, and all the kids went down and watched fish. And also they got to see the cars pushed out or get stuck, and tickled them. That Model T would throw sand up real high, and that tickled all them kids anyway to see that sand fly. And they'd get all over them people that was pushing and whatnot, and that tickled them too. Their US 1 was all dirt road, and down there at Grant there's a big high sand hill down there, and they were always getting stuck down there, especially people from New York. They'd run into that sand every time and get stuck. And I don't know how they pulled them out, maybe with horses, some of them or something, because they couldn't hardly anything else to get up there but a horse. Maybe oxen, they had a lot of oxen at that time, they probably pulled them out with oxen. The railroad run across here was Union Cypress Company Railroad, and they hauled logs from over on the other side of the St. Johns River back in. And there's an old man with the name of Jim Mills that run one of the trains as engineer, and he could blow quite a few of the old religious songs, My Country 'Tis of Thee, and several more of them that he could play. And when he'd pass our house up there, he'd blow one of them every evening when we went by, and every morning come by, he'd play a tune on that whistle, train whistle. He'd stop and let me ride with him. I had an uncle lived out there on the river, and I'd get in the old cab with him and ride out to the river, and he'd let me out there. And then if I wanted to catch him back, I'd catch him back. He was a character anyway.
Did you ever go out on any of the boats that were down in the river?
I didn't go on the boats very much. There was quite a few big boats in my time. It was still coming down, but 1896, a lot of water, flood come and stopped up most of the river where them big boats couldn't come in on St. John. And I never went. I don't believe I ever went on one in the Indian River. And I didn't know much about the Indian River. I went down there some, and we used to go out there crabbing all the time, catch 2 or 3 wash tubs full of crabs, and get ready to leave. We'd throw them back overboard. We wouldn't eat them. Nobody eat them. And shrimp, catch a lot of big old shrimp over there at Banana River, but nobody ever eat them. Always throw them back. Didn't know they were good. Didn't know people eat them. Wouldn't eat anything like that. And we wouldn't even eat catfish, these freshwater catfish. I guess I must have been 16 years old or more before we ever eat catfish. Then found out they were the best fish in the water. We'd throw a lot of them away and give them away to people, be fishing, and throw them out so it'd leave more room for the other fish. And we'd throw the best fish away. They were better than the perch that we was catching. Or bass was pretty good. Not very big ones, about eating size is all we ever caught them. This log train here, they had somebody's got a picture of it somewhere. A cypress tree they cut down, and I think it was 3 or 4 car loads in that one tree. And the butt of the tree, the first one it filled up one whole car. That's all they could get on there, that one log. I guess it was 150 feet high or something like that. Big.
Not too much cypress left.
No, they another thing too. I got some boards, so cypress boards. It was cut in 1914, and they threw all the pecky cypress, they called it, away and burned it, and they give it to you to go haul it out of the way. And this old man got a bunch of it over there and built that house and built a barn and some sheds for the horses. And him and old man Gagner lived across the way. His name was Campbell, and they got in a fuss, so he went and bought some of that boards. I think they were 8 foot tall, and built a fence between their houses there for about well, I guess it's 300 or 400 yards where they couldn't see one another. I thought that was, and I got them boards and built a little shed out of it, and got some of it out here on the barn out here. It was cut in 1914, old peck cypress. They burned it, thought it wasn't any good, see, and it was the best lumber they had. They thought the worms would eat it, but there's no worm could eat it. It just growed in that tree somehow.
Let's see. Do you remember any of the early doctors or dentists or anything?
Oh yeah, the old fella George Crawford used to ride a horse in 1920, and 21. And I don't know where he come from, but he come to our house from Fort Christmas, and he would come south. And I remember he always had plenty of castor oil. And he had cream tartar and salts. We had to take that every spring on account of malaria fever. All the youngins had to take it. And he always had aspidity. That was if some of the kids got sick, well, you had to tie a little ball of aspidity and put it on a twine string, put it around your neck and tote it, and it stink, my goodness. But I guess it kept it off, because I don't think I ever had any of those kids' disease everybody had. But they went back there then, if a kid had the measles or mumps or, well, even whooping cough, and especially one makes the little old sores on you, chicken pox, they would go to the house so their kids would get them. So they'd have them when they're little, because if you get old and get that, they'd kill you, so, or make you bad sick. So they would take their kids where that was, so they'd get it and get over it, because it didn't hurt the kids very much. But then the German measles come along, and I guess killed a lot of people. Killed quite a few people, the German measles, when they first got it.
What do they do for malaria each year, you say?
The stuff that you put around your neck, what was it called?
Aspidity.
And what, is that a plant or a?
It's a gum, and you can get it in liquid form and take it. But my goodness, you ain't never tasted it. It tastes bad. Touched it to my tongue. I wouldn't take no more of that. I'd rather have the disease than I had the medicine. I thought, hey, it was bad. I remember that old man Crawford, though. My mother she bruised her finger, and it swelled all up and was real bad. He said, I got to lance it. And she said, no, it'll get all right. And he said, no, I got to lance it. Well, if my dad or some of us, they'd have taken a sharp pocket knife and stuck a little hole in there, and it would have been all right. But he lanced it, and he lanced it this way. And then her finger drove right up my hand like that and stayed there the rest of her life. Cut all them leaders in two. So he wasn't much of a doctor. But I guess he saved a lot of people's lives in a lot of ways and things he done. He carried a lot of worm medicine. I remember I had hookworms one time. They thought I had them. I don't know if we ever checked or not to see. But anyhow, the doctor. But now this was Dr. Bean. He was an old doctor here a long time. He delivered most of nieces and nephews, and he gave them, I think, 14 of them pills. They did give them to dogs a long time after they quit giving them to people, but they even quit giving them to dogs. Now, they were about that long and about as big as any thumb, and they were a yellowish looking color, and the stuff in them was real yellow. And one of them would have killed all the worms in me. It liked to kill me, but was supposed to take 14 of them things. I think it was one every day for 2 weeks, and I got along about the third or fourth day. When I'd start swallowing, it'd go down and come back up, and I'd swallow it and go down directly. It'd bust and go all over the place, and then I'd throw up everything I had. And after I don't know, I didn't take very many of them before I quit. I said I couldn't take more than them again. But the hookworms wasn't near as bad as the medicine. I tell you, I'd rather have the hookworms. That cream of tartar and salts too for malaria was a bad dose. Every spring we had to take a bunch of that. They mixed it up and taking it. Salts is a good medicine for a lot of things, and it's good for horses. And then like a poultice, like start putting on a snake bite, it's real good. You can put a
Epsom salts?
water, yeah, put Epsom salts on it, or put it in a real thick liquid like your feet and put it in it, and it draws out real good. There's an old woman lived right this side of us, Penny Simmons. She was a savage before she married Mike Simmons, and she knew all the things to take the herbs and stuff, and she growed some, and she'd go out in the woods and pick them and make some kind of medicine that she put on stuff, and she could care about anything, but she was a good doctor. One of her nephews got his head about cut off, and it cut one jugular vein all the way in two. There's just a little string holding it, and her boy stuck his finger down his side where it was pumping the blood out, and there was a big hole cut in the other one. And they carried her. They were over here out from Cocoa there, across the river on Lake Winder, on the west side of Lake Winder, and they went in a horse and wagon back up to where they lived. Up there at Wolf Creek was about 6 miles, and when they got there, she sewed that place up and put something on it, something she had, probably something she had made, because she made some mighty good medicines out of hog lard, and put everything in it that you could think of. You could get that stuff today. Now you can't get it, but it's better than most anything you can get from a doctor. Anyway, she fixed him up, and they carried him in an old Model T then to Kissimmee, the doctor over there, and I think his name was Hicks, the same as the doctor over here. I believe it's Hicks is over here, his daddy. Carried him over there, and he said, he looked at it and said, well, I don't know what doctor you carried him to, but it done a lot better job than I could have. They had some old sheets wrapped around it and pads. And he said, I'll put some bandage on it, and you better carry him back to him. And that was this old woman in it. But she delivered me when I was born.
There were quite a few Indians that lived.
Yeah, there was, when we lived down to Fellsmere, well, before my time they lived down there. My dad built a house down there on a place called Frank Bay. It may have been even before Fellsmere was there, because it wasn't there until 1910. It may have been before that. There was Polly Parker. She's a real famous Indian chief out in Oklahoma. She was there. She was a chief of this little tribe. She's chief of the whole bunch, but she was, had that little tribe there, village is all it was. And she come over to the house one time wanting to see my dad, and my mother told her, said, no, he's not here, but he'll be back in a little while. Figured they'd leave. And she says, we'll wait and sit down. So he didn't come back for a couple of days, and she stayed there, and that was in 1905, because my brother was born, just a little boy, and 5 or 6, somewhere along there. And what she'd come up for was to tell him that somebody was stealing the hogs, and it wasn't them, and told him who was doing it. And they had walked across the marsh. We didn't know anybody could cross, but she'd come across with, there was 5 or 6 of them. There was 2 girls with her, I think she said, and 4 men had come across the marsh. And that's all she'd come for. Then they supposed to have an uprising, and my dad had a bunch of people to haul in, they had big old ox wagons. They had 3 yokes of oxen to pull each wagon. It was a big wagon. And they pulled lighted wood into Sebastian for the train to run on. They run on lighted wood. They hauled that in there, and the Indians were supposed to come and wipe them out at Fellsmere. So they had 2 guys go out there, and they were supposed to holler if they seen the Indian while they was going to give the alarm. So they got lost off of one another somewhere or another, and one of them done something and hollered, and that scared the other, and he run told the Indians were coming. So everybody bunched up to leave, and my dad said, nope, Polly ain't going to let them bother me. Old Polly won't let them bother me. He said, I'm not a-going. So they left, and there was one baby born in the wagon as they was going to Sebastian. They had a little fort built over there. One of his old fort was left there. I don't even know where it is anymore. Anyhow, they all went over there, and my dad stayed, and they didn't come. And they seen him after that, seen her. He seen her, and she said, no, there wasn't nothing to it. They just, somebody had got that story up. But it scared them people pretty bad.
When do you think that was?
1905 or 1906, because my brother Minor was born in 1905, and he was real little. They wanted him. Begged my mother, said he'd make a good Indian. She'd say, I'll take him. They do that. They give kids to one another. Like the chief's son, that ain't his son. That's some kid he liked and taken up with him, and that's his son. That may not even be any kin to him, not even any of his relatives. But you know, I ain't too sure that chief deal wasn't pretty good way of doing things.
They kept cattle too, didn't they?
Oh yeah, they had a lot of cattle. Yeah, I love talking about them cattle and them Indians. Them people come down here a long time ago, and they wrote a lot of books about it and tell you that all you had to do to go to Florida, or even Texas, they had a show, you know, John Wayne went out there and marked all them cows. They, my uncle and them, they remember most of that thing because they were down here, you know, way back, their daddy and them, and they said that all them people that come down here and mark them cows was hanging out of oak trees somewhere. they didn't believe in then letting a man off if they caught him stealing cows. Why, they just the first oak tree they come to, why they threw the rope over a limb and jumped his horse out from under and rode over and left him. There wasn't a whole lot of stealing, I don't think, went on during that time. Now, they didn't have any law down here. The old timers said Gainesville was the last law. Now, they had sheriffs, and they were rough characters, but they couldn't get around all the people. And it was mostly families, like family feuds and things. Maybe somebody did steal somebody's cows, but that's because they had other problems. See, they were stealing from a family. They wasn't stealing from the man or stealing because they wanted to. Some of them I've known that they told about would find somebody else's cow, kill her and get the liver and put it upside the fire and eat what he wanted of that and just leave the cow lay there. Pick out a good fat cow, a good cow, and kill her. And then some of them they would cut the dewlap hangs down under the throat of a lot of these cattle, especially a lot of them old Spanish type cows. They had a dewlap on them, and they would split that and stick the front leg through it so the cow couldn't get up. And then the guy had found her after she died. See, and it was a family feuds more than it was. But now they did steal cattle, and when they stole them, I understand that they sold a lot of cattle. Like out in Texas, I understand if they drove off 50 head of cattle, why they had a pretty good haul. Down here, they didn't start off with less than 1,000, but they had to drive them from like Kissimmee or south of Kissimmee. They had to drive them all the way like to Jacksonville before they could sell them. So it wasn't any much use. They had to go a long ways with them. It take a long time. I remember one time, it was down there, and some fellow went to them. They imported during these feuds that they had to go, and they had a bunch of them going all at the same time. Some of them lasted out to others, but they had imported all the bad men they could get out of Dodge City or Tombstone, Arizona, or in Texas. While they got them, paid them big money to come down. And people had a lot of money, and they'd hire these people to come down there, and I think every one of them was killed except in William S. Hardin. And I don't think he ever made it back to Texas. I think he's died up there somewhere in northwest Florida. He had a store up here, one of them little old towns out east of Ocala. He run a store there for a long time. And he killed some bad men there that would come from, I think they're from Texas. The sheriff, they were wanting to do something, and the sheriff wouldn't let them, and they were going to kill the sheriff, and he went out there and shot them, 2 of them.
Tell us a little bit about the scrub cows.
They were the fighting type of cow that they brought. I guess that's about all they had in Spain. And they brought, I think there was 200 head of cows and 200 head of horses was brought in, I believe that was about, 15 and 13 or 15, 14, 15, somewhere along that area. And I don't know where they didn't do much with them, but it seems that most of them all got away, and then there were a lot of wild cattle. But by the time in early 1800s, somebody had marked all them cows and claimed them all, and also all the hogs. They were all marked. There wasn't no wild hogs. They were all marked.
How would they be marked?
They would catch them and put a mark in their ear, cut little props out there, like mine is swallow fork on a bit crop, or swallow fork on a half-flowered loose crop. The swallow fork is a thing like that in the end of the ear. The under half-flowered loose is a thing just about like that, only is half of it in the bottom of the ear. And then you could have an upper bit, you cut out a piece up, a round part out of the ear, under bit, a round piece. And now the Indians, they marked theirs where they'd start up next to the head and cut a little bitty place out, and each one had different. And they'd have 3 little notches, and then 3 space and 3 more little notches. And then on the bottom, the same thing. They didn't cut a very deep one. They just cut a little one. And theirs looked real funny, but nobody ever learned to read them. They didn't know whose hog was who. But everybody knew the marks and brands of people. They all, their marks and brands. If they, all the white people's marks and brands, why everybody knew. I had a fellow work for us way back there. He had a book, and he had over 500 marks and brands of everybody that he knew and their marks and brands and connected with them. Like some of them had people lived in Ocala. Well, he knew their mark and brand too, and he seen one of their cows somewhere, you know. One thing about that mark and brand business, the Mormons bought a lot of cattle from old man John Parton that lived up there in Gulf Hammock. And I don't know how many thousands of cattle he delivered to them. They were giving more money for them cattle than they were worth. But he kept delivering these cows, kept hauling them. So one day the old man asked him and said, when you going to quit hauling them cattle? He said, whenever you all mark and brand them, so I'll know that damn some you already bought, I'll quit hauling them back. He said, y'all turn them loose and they go back and I'll haul them back to you. But he had a lot of cattle. It was a joke, but they didn't think it was a joke. Every cow they got at that, they marked it. They thought he really meant it, but he was pulling their leg. Them cattle wouldn't go back. It's too far.
They're pretty sturdy stock, those scrub cows.
Yeah, one of them get bogged down. They were bad to fight, see. They would hook you or a horse or anything, especially if they had a little calf. You had to always watch, stay away from them. But they would live off of anything. They could live off of palmettos where these other cattle starved to death while they got fat. And then when you bred them up, they wasn't very big. When you put the Brahma with them, they got a lot bigger. That was the first cross we had because the fever ticks killed everything else. The Brahma was a little bit, I don't know where it was the skin or where the tick didn't like the smell of him or something. Maybe they wouldn't get on a goat. I don't know. They had that smell to them. Anyhow, they didn't kill the Brahmas as much as they killed the others. The scrub cow was immune to them. They didn't kill any of them. I seen them on them so thick until you couldn't have stuck a pin in a cow without sticking it through a tick. But the scrub cow would live, and then her offspring would live from it. So they were, that's one thing helped us a lot in the cow business. See, we had raised a lot of calves. It was good, had a lot of land. We had cattle all the way from Fellsmere up to Titusville on this side of the river, and from the other side, from way north of Deer Park all the way to Road 60 down there. See, it's all open range, just about it, and had cattle all the way. Taking us about 3 to 6 weeks to make the round. And when I got through, I was talking to somebody the other day, when I finished down that Road 60, it was about 70 miles home. Been riding 2 or 3 weeks and then head home. It was 70 miles or so to get home. That was pretty hard days, and them times were pretty hard. We enjoyed it to the nth degree. You have to enjoy it or you never will be a cowboy, or you can't stay with it. It'll eat you up. Everything it's just, a cowboy is just like playing football. Everybody does his part and a little bit more, and it's kind of a game. Like if the cattle gets away, why then that's the same thing if a guy didn't tackle a guy and he made a touchdown. See, so it's kind of, you got the honor behind you, so you got to hit that cow and get back and hit that other one before they get started off. Or they're off. They were all wild, but them old scrub cows that even after they were bred up, had some better blood in them, they would get in a bog hole and bog down, and you could go pull them out. And we usually go cut a bunch of palmetto fans and pile them up to usually wet anyway around there. We couldn't pull them out to dry ground, and we'd put the palmetto so they'd have a better footing if they got up. Come back and they'd be eat the palmetto fans and go. Ordinarily, most cattle would eat them, see, but they would eat them and get up and go. They were good marsh cattle. I've seen them out here in this marsh when the water was just their backs were sticking out of the water, and they'd stick their head down and leave it a long time. And when they picked their head up, they would blow 2 streams of water out 20 feet. Looked like there's a big bunch of water come out of their nose. I don't see how they held it all. But they had to go right down. They stayed fat. My goodness, as fat as they could be. They got something under that water.
They were
was real
something.
good. Yeah, real strong, high protein or something that they got. They were the worst cattle to fight. They would even run in. I've seen one out here run at my brother-in-law, a little bull, and he jumped out of the way. There's a cabbage tree there, and he run around the cabbage. And the bull stuck his horn in the cabbage before he couldn't pull it out. It held him. we went and put a rope on him and cut his horns off right at his head. We always carried a little piece of saw blade, a hacksaw blade or a meat saw blade, and put it up under the back of the saddle. Then you wrap a handkerchief or a bunch of grass or something around it, and you could saw a horn off right quick. You'd saw a horn off right quick. We carried one all the time, and if you got a cow that was bad to fight, or even a bull, we roped a lot of big old bulls and sawed their horns before we got it. One we come from, well, my dad bought this old man John Parton I was talking about. When he left Kissimmee and went to Osceola County and went to Guff Hammock, he sold my dad all the cattle he had left over there, and we went over to get them, and my brother had a bull over there that had went from somewhere west of Deer Park over in that vicinity, and they brought the bull in there, and we got him to Deer Park, and we couldn't do nothing with him. He was bad. Had big, long horns. So we finally got to Kempfer's butcher house there in pens. Well, we got him in that pen, and we run him in the chute and was going to get their meat saw and saw him off. It was drastic. We had to saw him off. Couldn't bring him across the river with them horns on him. We was scared to try it. So had to get them horns off. And got in there wasn't no saw or no nothing. There was no lax there. And we pulled his head up over the side of the pole and cut his horns off with the axe. And never had no trouble. Drove him right on the Fellsmere without any problem.
Okay, and let's cut right near the end of this one.
Interview with Frank Platt, 2502 Minton Road, Melbourne, Florida, August 27, 1992. Interviewer Nancy Yaseko, cameraman Robert Gilbert, equipment camera Sony BVP50, Beta SP recorder Sony BVW35, audio on channels 2 and 4. Copyright Brevard County Historical Commission, 1992. Judge Platt, tape 3. There's a correction on the address. Instead of 2502 Minton Road, it should be 2505.
I guess the mosquitoes were pretty bad.
Sometimes they were real bad. The old man said you could swing a quart can around all the way around you and come back and have 2 quarts of mosquitoes in it. So they must have been pretty bad. But I've seen cattle that they killed with quite a few cows that killed with mosquitoes. They smother them to death. The mosquitoes are so thick, so you can imagine. Now, they don't ever last long enough to suck enough of blood out of one. Now, in over a period of a time, maybe a month or so, if they don't slack up, but they usually slack up, see. But they get so many of them till they breathe them down in their nose, and then whenever the cow dies, they'll all pour out. And I've seen the balls that big around and probably 6 foot long. It'd come out of their nose. They were that much packed in there.
How big around?
Oh, it's probably an inch through and maybe more than a diameter, more than an inch, probably an inch and a quarter diameter. And there'd be like 15 or 20 dead here, and then over there 3 or 4 miles, there'd be 4 or 5 dead and like that. I don't know where them cows got most all the mosquitoes, because there's other cattle around there. Or maybe some of them had somehow or another blowed them out if they could, if they coughed or something. See, a cow can't breathe through their mouth, or no animals can breathe through their mouth, I don't believe.
What about people? What would you do with all? How'd you keep them?
Well, now we had mosquito bars and build smokes for the horses and dogs. Didn't have no mosquito bars for the horse, the dog, but we did for the people. And we always toted, that was one thing for sure you carried. You had a small blanket and a mosquito bar and an extra suit of clothes, and you always had a slicker. And that was about all you told it because the horse is a heavy horse, because you had to carry a lot of feed. We had all told up all our own feed most of the time. We put like 30 quarts of feed. We fed the horse 2 quarts night and morning, and like that. And we built smokes for the horses at night. We'd go around the place. And one problem we had there, the cows would come to that smoke and get all in there with the horses, and sometimes into the mosquito bar and everything else. Another thing is, a funny thing about mosquitoes, real bad. The cows would get scared of something and run through camp, and they call it stampede. And then you run out of that mosquito bar and tore it up. That usually turned the cows, but when you come back to them, mosquito bars tore up, so you had to kind of wrap up the best you could. And it's always hot. I never seen it when you couldn't get under the blanket. It's too hot, and them mosquitoes get under there with you anyway, pretty bad.
What would a mosquito bar look like?
It's a netting, like a cheesecloth netting, and the top of it was usually on a bolt of homespun cloth, and it was about 24 inches at the top and 6 foot long, and then the bottom part of it was real, would cover an area of 6 foot across at the top and 7 foot down the side and 6 foot across at the bottom. In other words, you could put 2 beds under one bar. And if another thing, if you had a hole in it, like I was talking about, well, you just taking a twine string and pull it up and wrap it around it, and the hole was fixed. But if you got one little hole in it, all them mosquitoes will find it in a few minutes. And you have to get you a palmetto fan or something and kill all them that's in the bar when you get it down. They're always in there whenever you get in there. And I've seen it, the mosquito bar would be plumb black. It'd be kind of light where you could see, maybe just for daylight, and it'd be on that mosquito bar plumb black. But the horses didn't seem to mind them as bad as they do now. Maybe they were used to them, or the cattle didn't seem to mind them. There wasn't any mosquitoes where the cattle were. I never could figure that out, but you never could get in a bunch of cows to sleep. There's always wild and run off. But the mosquito bar, we usually found something to tie it to it, but if we didn't, we just stuck 4 cabbage stalks in the ground. And if there's something to tie it up high, you tied it up higher because it was cooler. But if you didn't have anything tied to, you stuck them in the ground and then tied just where you roll over where you wouldn't touch it on the top. But they didn't get on the top much anyhow. They were around the sides. I remember one time we was over here and they were that thick as that guy where he caught the 2 quarts in one quart can. We was bringing some cattle from up there at Orlando and carrying to Fellsmere, and there was a boy come with us to help the other guy, and he didn't have a mosquito bar. Somehow or another, his got left out of his bedroll, and he put the bedroll on. I guess his mother had probably taken his young boy, had taken it out to wash it, and she didn't put it back in. He didn't know she had, so he come off without it. And we got over there just across the river from here, Billy Kempfer, where he lives there. And there's cow pen and everything there, and we stopped there, and the mosquitoes are about as bad as they get. I tell you, they were bad. And he didn't ask much, so I moved mine over a little bit and let him sleep with me, and ever since that, me and him have been good friends. One way to gain a friend, let the mosquitoes get after him. I thought that's a pretty good way to gain a good friend.
I guess natural disaster-wise, there were a few hurricanes that came pretty close.
Yeah, I remember the first one was in 1920 or somewhere thereabout. We lived at Deer Park, and there was a big hickory nut tree between our house and the barn out there. And it was had been there for probably several hundred years because there was big old scars all over it and everything. It was a big old tree. And it blowed it down right towards the house, and it lacked about 10 feet getting to the house, the top of it. And that's about all I remember about that, except in the high water that we had during that same time. We couldn't cross the creek to get out. You had to swim a horse across to get out. And we was going to school, and when the high water come up, we were at school, so we couldn't get back home. And there was an old camp house up there about halfway from where we lived to the schoolhouse. And we camped there and went to school, wore the same clothes we had and everything all week, went to school. The water was on down that time. Weekend, we got back to the home.
What about around here? Any bad storms come through?
They say they got a high pressure area or a low pressure area or something that keeps them away, some kind of pressure area anyway. It keeps them off of Melbourne. I remember one went in at South Florida down there somewhere around Naples and went all the way up to the Panhandle Panama City and turn around and come back to Tampa. It already went through Tampa, come back to it, and then went to Okeechobee and headed for Melbourne. And the next thing they knew about it, it was 100 miles west of the beach over here, west of Melbourne. I mean, east of Melbourne, out in the ocean. And then another one we had not too long ago hit Miami and come up the coast, went out to Fellsmere and was headed for here. And we didn't, all of a sudden it was gone, didn't know where it was headed. And they found it about 50 miles out there in the Atlantic. But we get a lot of water, and our problem is little tornadoes. They used to, didn't nobody know anything about it, but I knew they come through because I'd seen where they'd struck when we only had like 65-mile-an-hour winds, while there'd be someplace really tore up a little area. I've even seen it blow the palmettos out of the ground and blow lighter stumps out of the ground. So it must have been a mighty strong tornado to have done that, but it didn't hit anywhere, only in the open spaces. There wasn't any houses or anything. I don't know what it had done to a house. It probably demolished it or maybe taken it off. It pulled it off.
What about bad freezes?
Freezes, we've had several of them. They claim that the walrus was killed by the freeze here lately, but we had in the 30s, I forgot now what year it was, we was going to school at the, they just built the new roof vinegar building. So that was before the 30s, it must have been in the 20s sometime. The water spigot was leaking out there side the building, and it was froze all the way down, and the water pipe was froze, and it was noon, and the next day at noon it was still froze, and it didn't kill the koalas. So that was colder than anything we've had here lately. They're talking about, I ain't seen that one. We had I think it was about 58, and we had a bad freeze, and it had, everything was pretty well froze in the afternoon. Our water pipes were all froze, and we had a sprinkler that was running all the time, and it kept sprinkling, and we had a little bush out in the back, and Nancy went and got it had froze up on top of it and all the way down to the ground. She went and picked off a lot of them icicles and went and put them in a deep freeze and kept them for several years because she thought they was pretty. I never seen any snow on the ground, except then I've been up there in Canada, that glacier, and walked on it, but I never seen it snow and it'd be on the ground then. I was also in New Zealand at Camp Mount Cook up there at and it was snow there, and got pictures of me, but it hadn't snowed in 2 or 3 weeks. It wasn't nothing but ice, old froze ground.
Okay, moving on to a new subject.
Okay.
I bet you've seen a real change in the land values around here.
Oh yeah, I remember land. I don't think it was worth 3 cents an acre, to tell you the truth, but none of it didn't sell. The county taking nearly every bit of it. It was 2 or 3 cents an acre for taxes, and nobody wouldn't pay the taxes. Just let the county have it.
Was that during the Depression? Or?
Yeah, during the Depression. Nobody had any money to buy in with anyway. They didn't have the 3 cents to buy an acre. But there was some talk about later. My brother bought a bunch of this land down here for $5 an acre, and the Miami Herald, because he owned the bonds of the drainage district and he bought that piece of land from the drainage company, they were going to say that the deeds wasn't any good, that he'd have to give the land back to the drainage company. Anyhow, I guess he would have had to give it back, but there was a colonel over here at the beach that happened to hear about when they was having a trial, happened to hear about it, so he come over there and said that he wished he knew Platt owned the land. They tried their best to sell it to him for $3 an acre, and he wouldn't have it, or nobody else would, that he could have got it for $3, and the judge threw it out of court. That helped that land deal some. Then he sold that to, let's see, Mackle, I think he sold it to, and then he started general development, and that was all the general development land was what he had. I think there's 62,000 acres of it to start with.
Yeah, I guess it's...
The land here then, though just before that, land was like $5,000 an acre. In 29, boom, everybody was in, and nobody didn't want to sell them land, but nobody but the county owned it, and they wouldn't sell none. And people that owned land, what really changed the value of your land so much was the Murphyized tax, where that they could take your land if you didn't pay the tax. Before that, if you own a piece of land and you didn't give nobody a deed, you could sell it to 100 people, but you'd never put a deed on record. A lot of people see they didn't. Well, the courthouse was down at Kenansville, where you bought a piece of land up here in Titusville. You didn't want to ride a horse all the way down there to put it on record. You thought, well, I'll go down there next week or next month or next year and put it on record. Well, somebody come along and buy it, and you'd give them a deed. Yours never was on record. Okay, way on down here, 30, 40 years, somebody owned the land, or some of your grandchildren, great-grandchildren come up and say, well, they never put this on record. Go down and take the land. Whatever you had built on it, the land was yours. They didn't get paid for any improvements or anything. So that changed that situation a lot. And the county got a lot of land too. The county that gave them the power to take the land too. And I reckon they own just all of Brevard County, because one year there, I think they didn't pay the school teachers for like 3 months, or any county workers. And they couldn't, nobody had no money. They couldn't buy land or nothing. They couldn't even pay the taxes. So that was the reason they was in such bad shape. The railroad, and I think that was maybe even the light company, I don't think paid any taxes. The railroad paid most of the tax. My dad paid a pretty good portion of it in that time.
What about lately?
It's got real bad. It's one thing that really has got me worried is this stormwater tax they put on. That's $7 an acre when you own a lot of land, and they're never going to do any good. They're never going to do anything to help me. And anyway, that just money like throw it away. But taxes has got really out of line. Like I tell everybody, you can't tax a place into the economy. You can't get it up by taxing. You got to start on the other way around. Lower the taxes, and something's got to be cut out. I don't know what it's going to be.
If it's a small lot with a house, that makes more sense, I guess, for that use of the property.
Yeah. Well, I don't see too much that they can do. They already got a drainage district and the flood control people. That's enough of taxes for water. So why did they want to put on a storm tax? It's not going to do very many people any good. Now, if they want to put a storm tax in the city of Melbourne and run some pipes into the Indian River and let it go out, or build them some kind of a refinery plant to fix that stuff they run through there, they can go into the river, that'd be all right. But none of my stuff's going in the river anyway.
I guess a lot of land that used to be ranch land is now houses.
Oh yeah, nearly every bit of it is it's not ranch land anymore. The only one I know left here would be my nephew out there, Carlisle. He's got quite a bit of land left, but what didn't sell, like I sold the most of mine, but the government taking it endangered wetland. And what it's endangered from, I don't know. It's been there for millions of years. It hadn't changed a whole lot. And they're talking about the water situation. If you got rain, you got water. If you don't got rain, you got, you might say, a desert. So he's got quite a bit of land left, but they've taken a lot of his land too, all along the marsh out there. And actually, I think it was better when the cow people owned it, because there was a lot more hogs and deer and wildlife on it then than it was. Quick as the government gets a hold of it, the first thing they do is open it up to the public. Well, these poachers go out there, and pretty quick there's nothing left. One of your stray calves gets off over there while using somebody's deep freeze pretty shortly. So you know what happens to everything else. The deer and the hogs and everything disappear fast. I don't know. Taxes is a only way you can keep a place going, but you can get carried away with it. Too many things that people want, and they say, well, we'll put a tax on and get it. They could do without that. A whole lot better than they can do without something to eat. They're taking all their farmland, and people ain't gonna have nothing to eat. Well, then what they're gonna? I think they plan on importing it, but then you got to have money to import it. So where they gonna get the money?
I was going to ask you if you'd be willing to play us a couple of tunes on your harmonica.
Oh yeah. I blow that thing all the time anyway. So one more little bit wouldn't hurt. I usually carry that in my pocket knife, chew tobacco. Blues, stay with me. Another one? The dogs? We'll run the dogs. Yeah! Hey! Yeah! Catch it! Get it! Hey! Oh! Oh! Old Blue struck his trail. Hey! Catch it! Oh! 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 Hey! Yeah! 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 Catch it! Get it! Oh! 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 Hey! Yeah! Catch it! Get it! Oh! 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 You treat him. Run him right up a tree.
So you carry your harmonica with you?
All the time. I've carried it for, somebody won't know the other day, could I show them how to play a harp? And I said, like I play it. And I said, no, but I can tell you how. I said, get you a harp and start practicing on it every day for about 70 years, and you can blow it as good as I can. That's all there is to it. It's just simple as that. I don't know where the idea come from or nothing. Other people was blowing one, and I picked it up and started blowing on it when I was about 5 years old, and been blowing on it ever since. My dad blowed one, and he would buy them. You could buy it anywhere. Every commissary and every little old place, if they sold anything, they had a harp. And it was only 10 cents, these good ones. They cost $20-some now, and you can't even buy them anymore. They don't even make them anymore. But there's none like this. There's a lot of people make them, but they're not like this one. Anyway, he'd buy it, and he'd blow 4 or 5 tunes on it and let it up on the shelf, and I'd leave it there for a week or two, and I'd say, if you ain't going to blow that harp, how about me blowing a little? Yeah, go ahead and take it. And I'd go hide. Wouldn't let nobody know it. So a long time, I guess I'd been blowing the thing for 30 years before some of the family even knew I could blow a tune. So a lot of other people knew I could blow it, but the family didn't know it. I didn't let them hear me. I was kind of bashful about that harp blowing back in them times. But it's like smoking or anything, habit, and there's a lot of company. I camp by myself a lot, cow hunting and screwworm time and all. I go a long ways and do a lot of camping and come in, maybe get through kind of early before dark and get supper all ready to go to bed and everything. Too early to go to bed, I take that harp out and blow it 3 or 4 hours, and then I could sleep all night. There's a lot of company. It's like anything else. Of course, out there you always had a dog and a horse and something you could talk to. The only thing that says it's all right to talk to your horse or your dog, but when they start talking back to you, you better do something. Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Get to talking back to you, while you better do something.
What kind of things would you have in your pack when you went out?
Well, like I said, in the bedroll, well, you had a blanket and sometimes a thin like sheet that you could cover with if it was real hot, or you put a sheet over you sometime. One thing that was is a dew fell on that, and it would run down in the middle of it. You had a drip on it. If you had a sheet like a thin, something real thin, see. Or it would keep that water off of you, and then it helped. And then in your saddle pockets, you had everything you had to eat would always carried in the saddle pockets. And they were pretty big. They put a lot of stuff in them if you packed it down in there. Biscuits, and we always carried a boiler. That was a little tomato can. Tomato cans were better than anything else. They last long, they didn't rust out. And you carried coffee. You had plenty of coffee always. And our coffee, though, was a little bit on the strong side. You put the water up there and let it start boiling, and you get all you could hold in it. It helped 1 cup of coffee, and pour all that coffee you could hold in your hand in that boiler and let it boil for a while. And then you always had in your cup, you had a little water, and you put a few drops of water, and then all the grounds went to the bottom. And some of them just set it off and let it cool a little bit and then drink it out of the boiler. But most of us poured it in the cup. And you could pour the last bit of it in, the last drop, and not get a ground in it after you get used to doing it all the time. It's no problem. Like somebody was telling me here not very long ago about, I showed them how to saddle a horse. and to go around on the other side and check the gird every time. And I never checked the gird. And Ricky, he said, how come that you tell me to go right and check that gird and you just reach it out? I said, well, after you've done it for 60 or 70 years, you don't have to go right. You pull it down, you know where it's at. But if you hadn't been doing it, or even a new saddle, even I would go check a new saddle because I wouldn't know how it felt. But that old saddle, I'd been putting it on for 30 years and jerking it down, and I knew when it was where it's supposed to come anyway. That's where it was right, so no problem. That,
You mentioned you carried a knife and matches. And
yeah, matches, and usually always had a knife. I mean, a match box or something to carry and keep them getting wet. And if it rained, everything, you always build a fire. I don't see how they build it a lot of times, or how I built it is everything was wet, the wind was blowing, and you get a fire going somehow. I guess the Lord must have helped them. And of course, you always had the hat and some kind of shoes. So the hat was usually better than the shoes. The old shoes are about wore out. You still wear them. One thing, the most comfortable thing is a wore out pair of shoes or a wore out old hat. Everybody likes to wear them all the time as long as they'll stay together. The main thing was a pocket knife. You used it more than anything else because you had to cut everything you eat, just about it all, the meat and everything, and you never eat without meat. You always eat meat. And the main stable was bacon, white bacon. You can, if you go off in the woods with smoked bacon, in about a week, you get up in the morning and it's got a nasty taste to it. You don't want no more. But white bacon, you can eat it 3 times a day for 6 months. And you leave home, I never did, but I've seen a lot of old boys leave home. It was kind of on the fat side, and after about 3 weeks, he'd lost 30 or 40 pounds, and when he left, he couldn't run 100 yards without sitting down and rest. He could run a half a mile or catch 40 Ks, and when he left, 3 Ks would give him out, but after he stayed out there about 3 weeks eating that white bacon. And we had sweet potatoes and Irish potatoes, and we usually put them, they were small, and we put them in that boiler and boil them at night after, when we started to go to bed, well, we'd boil them, and sometimes we'd where the fire was bit, we'd dig it out and put potatoes in and cover it over the next morning. And we usually always, like, 1 potato would do for 2 people, or we carried canned stuff, like canned tomatoes. 1 small can of tomatoes would do for 2 people. Each man had to carry his own bacon, but like you would tote the can today, and I would tote one tomorrow, put it in your muzzle, see, where you had your horse's feet. And we had a wallet. Very few people knows what that was. It was a piece of canvas sewed together. It was about 1 foot wide and sewed all the way around. It was about 8 to 10 foot long. And you put, sometimes you put a half a sack of corn, which was about 80 quarts, in one end of it, and then in the other end, and wrap it around the horn of the saddle and let it hang down on each side. And we usually would go, like, the first 2 days, we'd be going to another cow pen. Then maybe we'd stay there a week, so you fed up a lot of that corn seed. So that the second day you have to just wear it 2 days is about all.
okay.
Very
So-
seldom ever carried any silverware of any kind, no spoons or nothing. You cut if you had beans or tomatoes you was eating, well, you cut a palmetto stalk off and cut it and make a spoon out of it, and you can eat with it just as good as you can. And then in a lot of places we had cook pots and stuff, and even rice buried, and sometimes we would take like grits or something and cook it, white beans, and we'd cook them in there. And sometimes we had people would take your silver, but they never bothered our old big iron pots and stuff until the Navy come over here, and they got the Jeeps, and they run through the thing. They got every one of them. I guess they're the ones that got it. There's always Jeep sign there, and they were the one had in Jeep, so we thought the Navy did it. We were about quit anyway at that time. We was selling the land and moving out to quit. My dad sold Duder that piece they got up to where they're building the courthouse up there and all that. He sold him 62,000 acres, I think it was, for $2.50 an acre. And he had about 125,000 acres in that pasture. And Duder wouldn't have the rest of it, all that up there by Pineda and on north up to Cocoa. They wouldn't have any of that in there on the railroad. They just wanted that out there west.
How would you get the news?
Word of mouth. There wasn't any newspapers, and I don't think anybody read them anyway. If they put out a newspaper, there wasn't nothing in it, so nobody didn't read it, you know. But word of mouth. Everybody knew everybody, and they would ride a horse over to tell the next family, and they'd go to tell the next family. 2 or 3 days like a killing down at Arcadia was always up to Ocala in 2 days, quicker than they could have got it printed and got the paper out. A lot of people knew about it. Most anything happened like that, somebody died, everybody knew it, and right away.
Didn't hardly need a telephone.
No, that I tell you, it was kind of a funny thing. They had telephones around here way before my time. I think I guess I must have been 30 years old before we ever had a phone or even had running water in the house, and no electricity. We had a carbide deal at gas run stove and lights. Pretty good time back, but that all went bad for long and rusted out and whatnot. So we didn't even renew it. We just got one plant put in at one place, and it didn't do what we wanted to, so we quit.
Okay, and we're at the end. Let's cut.